Good evening. Welcome to the Oak Grove Community Council's January 2025 meeting. So we all made it through the holidays and we're all back here again. And so it's good to see people on the screen and in the room, and we'll do our best to make sure that everybody can hear. So one of the things that we're going to do with introductions is when we invite people who are at home to introduce yourself. Tell us if you're having any issues with sound or screen or what sounds like. And again, we might not be able to fix it tonight, but it will give us a sense of what we're working for. And if you were here last December at the meeting and it's better than that or worse, let us know that too, and we'll do what we can. So let's start with the officers introducing themselves. My name is Valerie Chapman. I'm the chair of Oak Grove Community Council, and I live on Evergreen Street, just a block from the trolley trail. So I'm way at the north end.
And I'm Mark Elliott, the vice chair. I live there with my husband Kirk, and we live on Riesling Road off of Southview and Concord Road.
And I'm Jane Civility. I'm the treasurer, and I live 3 blocks down Oak Grove Boulevard.
So I'm going to invite people in the room to speak up because I got some signals that people can't hear, or the sound floats to the top. So
And Wayne, is there? All right, my name's Wayne Potter. I'm a member at large of the board. I live just off of River Road, down that way about 5 minutes on Willamette View.
Joseph.
I'm Joseph Edge. I'm also a board member at large, and I live in the River Forest neighborhood.
Let's just go around the room here. Speak up or.
Hey, I'm Daniel Laird Greensight. I live just off Park Avenue by the next station.
I'm Bob Blair, and I live down on Lori, down next to Roseville.
I'm Susan Keel, and I live on Brookshore Lane, and I'm also a board member for Oak Lodge Water Services.
I'm Michael Lynn, and this is my wife, Ellen Berkland. This is our first meeting. We live on Hill Road, just off of Oakfield in the Fred Meyer.
I'm Tina Howe, I live on Park Avenue.
I'm Joyce Johnson, and I live by Putnam High School on Gordon Street.
Hi, I'm Ben Cheney. I live on Briggs up near Skillberry.
I'm Glenn, I live on Evergreen, about McDowell, so close to the trolley trail.
All right, let's introduce the people that are online that are with us tonight. Cindy.
I'm Cindy Brown, live at Roseville, and the sound is quite echoey.
Baldwin.
I'm Baldwin Vanderbilt. I live right near Stringfield Park. The audio has been very echoey, but Joseph's was really, really good. So whatever he's doing, duplicate that for everybody else.
He's at home, he's not in the room. So we should all leave. I think that's the bridge we're trying to figure out, is how to make the sound good for people who are in the room as well as online. And I want to say that all of you folks that are online, we can hear you very well. So, Tom?
I'm Tom Hogan, and we live on Oatfield between Concord and Thiessen. Now, I can hear you fine. And as people get further away from the mic, it's harder to hear.
Pam?
I'm Pam Horan. I live at Rosevilla, and I find the sound a little echoey, but I can understand everything, so I'm good.
Hammond?
We're Tom and Jolene Hammond. We live on Viewcrest off of Wallace.
Linda?
I'm Linda Seals and I live off of, at the end of Woodland Way, south of Oak Grove Boulevard. And I can understand what y'all are saying, but it is a little echoey.
Dave?
Dave Doback, I live at Rose Villa.
And Dave, do you have your picture deliberately turned off?
I have my video turned off, yes.
Okay. Thank you, but welcome. Becky? Becky, are you there? You're muted if you're trying to talk with. Do you want to introduce yourself, Becky? So we're not hearing anything from you, Becky. I see that you unmuted. Well, maybe keep trying and we'll figure that out because we see your name and we know you unmuted, but we can't hear you. Sue.
Sue Conahan at River Road and Parkview Circle, and I can understand everything that's being said.
Great. I'm not sure how we get at the echoey bit, and this room needs some sound baffles up high. So maybe we should do like a sound baffle fundraiser. Get some to absorb that sound.
I
So
love the ceilings, beautiful.
yeah, well, we're glad everyone is here. So let's do some officer reports. Treasurer.
Because I'm in the office of reports, the treasury report is as follows. As per our last meeting on the 4th of December, we made a holiday donation to go toward local schools, and that was voted for in favor by the body. The amount of those, the amount we spent was spread out upon the following organizations. $200 was donated to Youth in the High School for their holiday dinner, which is basically funded by the staff there. $100 went to the Elks Club right here in Hill Grove. They built Backpack Buddies system for Riverside School. Backpack Buddies, if you're not familiar with, is a manner in which different organizations will fill kids' backpacks with extra food for some students to take home on weekends or holidays. Also, $200 was donated to the North Platte School District through the Wichita Center in Milwaukee. And that center will fill Backpack Buddies for both the local Oak Grove Elementary School down the road and our local View Acres Elementary off of Hill Road. That came to $500. And at the meeting, we passed our famous antique collection bucket, at which we made $15 from last meeting. And that leaves our treasury right now at a balance of $835.32. Thank you.
So we sent the draft minutes from December out with our agenda online. They were also on the back of agendas that are here, the minutes are there. So what I'm asking, were there any corrections or changes to the minutes as they were printed out? That is online. All right. If there are no additions, corrections, changes, then the minutes will stand as they were done. Okay, so our program tonight is going to start with Captain Michael Shelton. He let me know. Okay, so Becky can hear us, but we can't hear her. So, however, that's working. Thank you for letting us know, Becky. So we're glad that you can at least hear us. So when Joseph, you could start, when Captain Shelton gets here, he would like to have the opportunity to go. So how should we handle that?
Do you have any fun games to play for a few minutes before Captain Shelton arrives? You know, it is kind of disruptive, you know, to get into a presentation and have to stop and then, you know, get restarted again. You know, I don't mind doing that so that we can make the best use of our time if that's what you feel is best. But yeah, I guess I was hoping that Captain Shelton would be present for.
We have a couple of announcements that have to be made, so maybe we could go ahead and do some of those at this time. You see the when people are coming in, Joseph, so you'll know when he gets here. Susan Keel, who is the chair of the Water District Board, is here.
Well, I'm not anymore. As of this month, Kevin Williams is the chair. There are 2-year durations for the chair, and my 2 years are up. And so Kevin is chair now for the next 2 years, and vice chair is Ginny Van Loo, and Paul Warnick will remain as the treasurer. And the other 2 of us, Heidi and I, are directors. We have little subcommittee kind of assignments that we work together on, but I just wanted to remind you, you may have seen this already, but next month, on February 20th, in this room, we will have the open house on the Capitol program from 5 to 7. And I would love to see a bunch of you there, because it's not our entire budget, but it is a good chunk of the budget, and it, I think, demonstrates fairly clearly where your money's going. So, and that will be one of the first things that we pick up in the budget process. Mark's on the budget committee, but you know, it'll be a chance to preview that and give any feedback to, I mean, the real people. Brad will be here, Brad Albert, the general manager, but he's also an engineer, and our other couple of engineers will be here as well. So they ought to be able to answer any question that you come up with. Now, when you make that kind of statement, one of you will have a question that they can't answer, but we'll get the answer for you. The other thing is that we are now working on the a different pump station district, kind of the one that has been in progress has been the one on Oak Shore Lane down by me, and that one is virtually complete. But there is another area where, because of the infiltration into the pipes, the age of the pipes, the cracks, the leaking areas, we are doing major improvement to those lines, which de facto will reduce the amount of clean water, surface water that's going into those sewer pipes, and mean that you're transporting less to the treatment plant, but also increases the capacity that's available in those same lines. And we have done a good bit of smoke testing and early testing to look at those various lines and see what was the least expensive, most efficient option that we could use to work on those. So we're not just ripping up all the pipe and putting in new pipe. There are other options where you line that pipe and do some other kinds of things. It also doesn't cause as much disruption in the street. And if you go to our website, I have a map of the area that is impacted, but for general purposes, it's kind of, I'd say, down by Meldrum and Britain and up to Glen Echo in that area. Not exclusively just those streets, but in general. If you go to the website, I think you get a better perspective on exactly the impacted areas, but it's up that way. And maybe the third thing, well, it's about 4,200 feet of sanitary sewer main line replacement improvement, however you would call it, that we're talking about in this one. And the final thing is that on the 12th of February, Brad and the partners that we have hired to help with the lobbying are going back down to Salem. And we're asking for 3.3 million for this infiltration kind of work. We were pleased that we received 3 million for the tertiary treatment, the third level of treatment we've been doing on the treatment plant. This is now on the infiltration. So we're down there for a first cut, and we'll have to educate some new people that are down there about what we're doing here and why we could use their help. That's ratepayers are the only place that we have to go for funding on these major programs. So if somebody wants to ask a question, I'm happy to, yeah.
What time is the program on the 20th?
5-7.
5 to 7.
So when you go down to ask for the money, do you need a support letter from the Oak Grove Community Council, or if we?
Not yet. I think we're early on this one. I would call this more educational and talking to some relevant parties and newbies, frankly. And right there, I was interested after the last session and people that took credit for it that had not done much in regard to it. They may have voted for it, but that would be the extent. So we're gonna make sure that we have as many people as possible who know what we're doing up here.
Well, I know that the Oak Grove Community Council will be happy to support any.
Absolutely. So I'll let
grants
you know.
who are
Yeah.
getting, because it helps all of us.
When they're ready for that, we
Great.
certainly will ask, and you've been helpful in all regards. The community council has.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Susan. Okay, so Captain Shelton is here, so I would welcome Captain Shelton, and I'm going to figure out how to have a presentation to give, and I'm gonna let Mark figure out how to make Captain Shelton.
Just make him a co-presenter and.
Do you need to share screen?
I can share my screen if that's easiest.
All right, hang on here, let me see here. We can do this, yes. And how do we make him larger?
And remove the spotlight from us,
Remove spot.
and then you can spotlight him if you want.
Yeah.
Where did he go?
He's there, he's on the right, he's over on the right.
There we go.
Yeah, just drop the 3 dots right there and spotlight him, that'll make it big for us and everyone else.
People. You act like you.
And someone knows what they're doing.
Okay.
You ready?
Well, yes, we're ready.
Well, it's nice to finally meet you all. I know the last couple meetings we've had other representatives from my station visit with you. And as you can see, I'm not on duty today. I'm not in normal uniform. I'm at home. I just got off another meeting in regards to senior living within our communities. You know, we know that's an important aspect of life, is making sure that our elderly population is cared for. So I was just in a little seminar on that. But happy to come visit with you folks and kind of share some details on what's going on with the fire department, what's going on with the Oak Grove Fire Station, and then answer any questions you guys might have in regards to that. And so let me see if this works. Give me 1 second here. Okay. You see,
We've got.
can you see the screen that talks about talking points? Is that what you're seeing on your screen? Or do you see the one that's a bar graph?
Bar graph.
It's a bar graph. I can start there. Let's see. We get these monthly stats every every month on how we're doing, how many calls are going on within Clackamas County proper. As you can see at the top, for December, we had a little over 3,000 calls. Station 3, which is the Oak Grove Fire Station, is the busiest fire station in all of Clackamas County. A lot of people think that, up on 82nd Drive is the busiest or Oregon City's busiest, but as we drop down one tab here, you'll see Station 3, if you see my cursor. We ran 337 calls last month. Year to date, we're almost 1,000 calls more than any other station in Clackamas County. The nice thing with Station 3 for the citizens' perspective on what kind of response you're getting is we have 5 individuals that respond out of that station. So we have what looks like an ambulance. It's an ambulance during the day. It's a rescue at night. The only difference really is at night, it generally won't transport unless it's absolutely needed. So it'll respond instead of the fire engine to keep the fire engine available for bigger emergencies. So your car wrecks, your cardiac arrests, fires, things like that. One thing I wanted to point out, this little scale here talks about the average turnout time. That's how long it takes us to get up out of bed, get into the rig, and be on the road. And you'll see in both incidents here, we have Medic 303 with a 1:10 turnout time, and Engine 303 at a 1:06. So we're the fastest to get out of the station than all of our other stations. So we pride ourselves at Station 3 for making sure we're getting to those emergency calls as quickly as possible and making sure our folks in Oak Grove are taken care of. So this information's always available. Let me stop sharing this and I'll see if I can share my other screen. And the other screen really just had some talking points. Let me cue it up here. As many of you may be wondering what's been going on with the levy that we voted for this last almost 2 years ago. Let's see if I can share that. Are you seeing the Clackamas Fire website right now?
Loading.
Load. Can you see my screen or not yet?
Not yet.
Just to double click it.
You can move it there.
And it's pause. Why did it pause? Let's see. There. There we go. Okay, let me move this little taskbar. As many of you are aware, we had a levy that the wonderful citizens of Clackamas County voted on and approved to increase staffing. With our community is growing. We're pushing out, obviously we can't push any more towards the river, but we're pushing east, but we're also going up. You've seen a lot of buildings and structures going in Milwaukee, Clackamas County, or in Oak Grove. A lot of growth, a lot of homes getting plugged in. And so what I wanted to highlight just for the Oak Grove community, as you can see on this levy, hitting those objectives that the levy talked about or promised. So increasing our staffing. We were understaffed for a long period of time. Going through COVID, we had some budget cuts, a new chief. We found some discrepancies on monies that were being spent. And so a lot of more on the admin side, but staff was let go, but we didn't hire for quite a while to kind of deal with some of those budget issues to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible with the citizens' funds that they provide for us. But as you can see, after 1 year, we've hired 28 firefighters. 5 stations have increased their staffing. And what that means for the Oak Grove community is really, in order to efficiently and effectively mitigate an emergency, whether it's a fire, whether it's an extrication on McLaughlin, we need a lot of bodies to perform those tasks safely. We're still obligated under OSHA to do things a certain way. We try to comply with that as much as possible, but there are certain situations where if someone's in need, we're going to put our life at risk. But the nice thing is, if you look at that the upstaffing that we did here, right here on the 5 community stations, Station 1, Station 8, and Station 15. Those kind of all surround our east borders. So those are our responders that are coming in to help Station 3 mitigate those emergencies. We had a perfect example here last month on Oak Grove Boulevard. We had a fire just right off River Road. Some of you might have seen that on our Instagram page. But right behind the Bear Printing facility, there's a home, an elderly gentleman. And it was amazing to see how many firefighters we could get there in such a short period of time and have the staffing we need to really mitigate and put that fire out. The individual that lived in that home was safe, which was great. But that is a benefit to the Oak Grove community, that you're getting a better response now that we're taking care of Gladstone. We're getting a better response, that we're getting qualified, professionally trained career firefighters to your home faster. And if my station's out on another call handling a problem, you're getting somebody quicker there as a secondary response. So that is a huge advantage for your community that I want to make sure everybody's aware of. We're really striving as a department to provide the highest level of care, getting our rigs out the door right around that 1 minute mark. That's important to me and my crews. And then getting to your home in that less than 5 minutes, depending where you're located. So this newsletter, these talking points, this newsletter, those are all shared on our website. If you haven't visited our website, it might have popped up here a minute ago. Let me see if I can reshare that. And where did it go? But it's clackamasfire.com. And under community, we do a newsletter quarterly, which basically shares a lot of that pertinent information. For some reason my share, there we go. You see that webpage there?
Yep.
Yep. So clackamasfire.com, it's a great resource. I know a lot of folks in Oak Grove. We have a wide range of homes and how they're positioned, whether it be up on the river, whether it be in a wooded area, whether it be in a high density area. This website really has a lot of valuable information that you can utilize. Here's a wildfire action plan as we go into next year. We're getting drier and drier summers. How can you prepare your house? We have a section here, I believe it's on the home page. Latest news, our board meetings, things like that. If that's of interest of you, that's where all this is going to get posted. So I highly encourage everybody just kind of poke around in here. It's also got great tips and tricks for like winter preparedness. How do you prepare your home? What do you do if a pipe breaks? We can definitely come help assist getting the water shut off. But a lot of useful information as we rotate from season to season on what you can do in your own neighborhood or your own home to prepare yourself for an emergency. So hopefully that can be a resource for you. I'll stop sharing this. I know that was a lot of information really quick. Anybody have any questions on that information?
Bob.
Yeah, actually, I've got a couple. First one is, I know it wasn't sure if it was you that talked to us before the bond came up. We talked about adding staff. One of the things we talked about was adding the 4th person back onto the engine, the so-called dog driver. Wonder if that happened, because can't really tell out and out. The other thing is, I've noticed here of late, it's been a little time in Gladstone, and of course, right here, maybe Station 3, is that it looks like we've lost some apparatus. I've noticed it looks like the truck is no longer here at Oak Grove. Gone into the rescue and an engine, and I've noticed the same thing down in Gladstone, that they've, one of their bays is now open most all of the time. I was kind of wondering what is going on with the reassignments.
Yeah, so not necessarily reassignments. So the apparatus that we're at Station 3, you still have the same apparatus. So we have 1 fire engine right now, and then the rescue unit with a total of 5 personnel. Estacada has 1 fully staffed engine with 3 personnel at this time. That most likely will go to 4 if they ever merge completely and do a contract for service more long-term. But right now, that's the agreement we have with them to staff them with 3 personnel. They were running with sometimes 1, sometimes 2, and then relying on volunteers. And so it was hit or miss on the level of service you would get at that time. But as far as apparatus goes, those apparatus are moved around the district and utilized, but there were reserves. So a lot of times they're a reserve engine that is there for, because they have to go in for routine maintenance. They go in if they break down, of course, so that we can make sure that they're running efficiently. So the secondary rig that was at Gladstone is probably being used somewhere else. We do store the truck at Station 3 during the winter. So Station 4, which is up off Lake Road, they have a spare truck. The one that they respond in as their first out apparatus does not do very good in the snow. And so they have a spare rig that does much better. It's got a different transmission and steering capability. So they'll utilize that one in icy conditions, and then we'll store that truck for them. So that might be why you saw that extra rig in there for quite a while. But all of our stations surrounding us, Milwaukee, the Lake Road, Gladstone, and Oak Grove, all still have the same staffing, if not more personnel, with the same equipment. Did that answer all your questions?
So you said that there's not a truck that's staffed at Station 3? It seemed like there's always been a rescue an engine and a truck in there.
Historically, I think it did. We only have the 2 apparatus, and really it boils down to the ladder truck is a specialty apparatus. Those individuals that work on that. We have 2 main trucks, one in Oregon City, and then one on Lake Road, and then we have one right now that's called our squad. It carries extra ladders, longer ladders, and it's out in Damascus to kind of serve the east. Those individuals go through an immense amount of specialized training, and it's just not feasible to have that many trucks based on that need for what they do. They're constantly working the model to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible and providing the best service. Really, the best service that we found is fire engine, preferably with 4 people. Now, engine 3 only has 3 people at the moment. I'm working on getting that 4th at some point. But we do have the 2 individuals on the rescue unit. So technically our station has 5 personnel coming out of it. Whereas the ladder truck has 4 on it, which is a nice perk. But they found that strategically placing the trucks versus the engine makes more sense. And so you're still getting the same response. If there's a fire, whether it's all the way down on the river or it's up off of Thiessen, bordering our area, you're going to get the same response on a fire no matter where you're at. And the beauty is that we're able to get there quicker and we're able to get a lot more individuals there quicker based on the model we're currently operating. Hopefully that answered your question. But I think historically, when it was the Oak Grove Fire Department years ago, they did have one of each of those rigs because they were a sole fire department within one station. They were self-sufficient, self-reliant. Whereas now we have Gladstone, we have Milwaukee, we have the Lake Grove Fire Station all surrounding us that we're pulling from in those big incidents.
Becky has typed in a question. I'm not sure I understand it. What it says is the cause of a fire public, oh, I get it. Is it public information about what happens if, for example, would they know if it was electrical or if it's lithium ion battery or something like that?
Yeah, every fire is investigated. As firefighters, like myself, I don't release that information right away because it is every fire, no matter where it happens, even if it was just an oven fire, does get an investigation. And so legally, our fire marshal's office, they release that information. So it does become public knowledge eventually. It also depends if it was a crime, It depends, you know, if it was arson, things like that, that obviously you're not going to get that information right away, unless there's a threat to the community. But those all do become public record. And our admin office, which is on that website, you can always request information on any incident that comes out. And then our if you use social media, our Instagram and our Facebook page, which is just Clackamas Fire, we release that information as we can. We'll also release it in a timely fashion, especially if it's you know, impeding traffic or something where we want to keep people away from an area. Maybe it was a hazardous material spill. We'll release that information right away on our social media platforms, as well as utilizing the news channels to make sure that they're letting everybody know of an issue.
So other questions, Wayne, you have?
Well, I don't have a question so much as that I was one of the observers of that action on Oak Grove at River Road, the thing of that fire. I walked with a neighborhood group. We have about 7 of us that walk by, and we heard all the fire trucks coming that morning, and it was just amazing because we stumbled across the fire site. And I was amazed at how many trucks were there. It was very impressive, but the number and type of trucks that were there were also impressive.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's in the last, I've worked for Clackamas Fire for 11 years now. I worked for the city of Salem for 8 years prior to that. And I'm thoroughly impressed with the direction Clackamas has gone to really provide an adequate and quick response. From the technology aspect, the way we're dispatched, it used to take almost a minute before you would find out in the station that you were going on a call. Now it's instantaneous. Our phones are going off. We have a reader board that says this is the address. So before we even get to the rig, we're already mentally preparing which direction we're going to go. What kind of call are we going on? And every station is getting that quick of a response to get out the door faster and more efficient, because we know that time is precious in these situations, whether it's a medical emergency or it's a fire or a car wreck. And so I appreciate your observation, because it is impressive how quick and how rapidly we can get the right amount of people there to mitigate a problem.
Ben, do you have a question?
Yeah, this is sort of half a comment, half a praise, I guess. If people are curious about like what's responding to what fire or you know, what's going on, I personally use an app called Pulse Point. And that seems to tap into some sort of an open data feed that the fire department, you know, makes available. So you can see, I think it's like you know, everything that's live, any live responses, and all of the apparatus that responded, which is very interesting, like a category. So not like lithium battery fire, but it will say, you know, like a heart attack, or I mean, I don't know, like a medical thing or a vehicle crash or whatever. So if anyone's just curious, like what are those sirens? That's something I would recommend. And then I would, you know, say thank you to whatever, you know, element of your organization supports making that data open and available. So certainly, you know, like seeing those open data feeds and wanna, you know, yeah, just say thanks.
Yeah. If you didn't hear that, the app is called Pulse Point, PULSEPOINT. It actually started out as a CPR related tool. So if you were CPR trained or first aid trained, you could set up your alerts for your community, and it would alert you, and then maybe potentially you could respond and do CPR and things like that. With our technology, now we've integrated it so you can see all the calls that are going on in Clackamas County. You can specify if you only want to see Engine 3 or your local community. But when you hear those sirens, you can look and say, oh, there's a residential fire down on River Road. And then, you know, I shouldn't go down there, or if you want to go check it out, a lot of people do. You know, just be careful. That's all I'll say, because there's a lot of fast moving rigs, but that is a good tool. Sometimes you can get audio, so you can actually hear us talking on the radio, which is kind of a nice feature. But yeah, if you have a smartphone, Pulse Point is a nice app to utilize.
I don't see other questions right now, so I just want to say thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to the time when we're able to have you actually in person one of these days.
One of these days for sure. I will say for everybody that's on this meeting, if you ever want to come down and check out the fire station, we have an open door policy, really from 9 to 5 ideally, is our preference. But if you want to bring your children down, grandchildren, and check out the fire engine, we love having guests. We love showing you the station and supporting our community. So just ring the doorbell either on the front of the station or the back, and we're happy to invite you in and give you a tour.
Great, thank you so much.
All right.
Linda Seals, do you have a question?
No, I have a comment to make about visiting the station.
Yeah.
I didn't realize, and you should point out that you have to go behind the station to the back door to ring the bell, because if you go to the front of the station that's facing Oak Grove Boulevard, there's nobody there to answer.
That has changed. Only through Monday through Thursday. Our wellness department, which does a lot of our medical testing and physical fitness type stuff, they are now office there. Monday through Thursday, you will have staff manning that portion of the building. And then if there's a sheriff's office vehicle out front, they have an office there as well. So if there's a vehicle there, then one of them is there. But yeah, it is easier if you just come to the back of the station. You'll see when you're looking at the back of the station, the left-hand side is where we're hanging out. That's our side of the building. There's a doorbell there. The front doorbell will ring us as well. It just takes us longer to get up there.
Yeah, I found that out the first year I came. I started bringing you poinsettias every Christmas.
Oh, nice.
And I found out that if I stood at the front door there, I just stood there. But if we come around back, then I can get somebody's attention.
Yep. Well, I encourage you all to stop in, say hi, and we have some great folks that work there. We have a lot of our newer employees, so we're what's called a probationary house. So there's usually somebody on probation, and they are very eager to give tours of the fire engine and the station. So that's part of their first year of probation is to do those sorts of things. So feel free to come by anytime.
All right. Well, thank you again. We really appreciate having you with us this evening.
Yeah, you folks have a great evening.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay as long as you like, but I know you're busy. Okay, let's move on to Joseph. Edge has a presentation, which he's going to do for us around middle housing, and Joseph will undoubtedly reiterate this, but this is about an ordinance that was passed in 2022. But with any kind of new ordinance or housing or anything like that, it takes a while for things to start coming online. So people are starting to see different kind of configurations of housing, and we're getting a lot of questions. So Joseph is here with us tonight so that he can talk us through what HB 2001 is, what it means, and all the ins and outs, and he's an expert. So Joseph, thank you for being here.
Yeah, you can spotlight him.
So let's see how I can spotlight Joseph. Okay. Spotlight. Yes. Yay. Okay.
Great.
I'll get it.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks everyone for the opportunity to provide the update. Basically, we did a lot of talking about, and this is just to kind of provide the background again. This is House Bill 2001 from the 2019 legislature. This is commonly referred to as the Middle Housing Bill. And there's other legislation. It's really part of a collection of legislation that has occurred over several sessions. But ultimately, we're still just kind of, that's what is popularized or popularly known as the House Bill 2001 moniker. So anyway, in 2022 and before that, even we had presentations from county planners and from myself to regarding how the county planned to implement it, or how it planned to comply, with the new legislation, and that that was through the county's Housing Strategies Phase 2 project. And so we have seen some presentations about this, but that was all leading up to it. And after it was adopted, after what was proposed by staff was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners, we never actually came back and talked about what it was that they adopted, to kind of give everyone, an expectation of, how things might be different, development-wise over the next, several years. And so that's what we're doing today. And so we're about 3 years too late, but that's okay. There's been some questions, like Valerie said, there's been some construction on the ground. And so, we'll be able to talk about a little bit of that because kind of as forecasted, there hasn't been very much, but there have been a few projects permitted. And so, again, we can answer questions or talk about what some of those are. But really what I'm going to do is, I'm going to substantially borrow from the county's presentation from 3 years ago to show you what they had changed. And we'll just talk about what's changed and be, kind of dry about it. And then if there's any questions, we can get to those towards the end. So I'll jump into the presentation now. And I have blended in a few slides from mostly from my presentation several years ago, again, before this was adopted. But we'll just jump in and talk about or show you what the so here's the, again, want to give credit to the county for actually putting together the presentation that I'm going to use. So again, middle housing is, really traditional housing styles that existed before, really the widespread adoption of, what's commonly referred to as single family zoning by jurisdictions in the middle 20th century. So, when you go to older neighborhoods, including Oak Grove, you will commonly see, this, what's highlighted here as missing middle housing, which is basically everything between, these kind of, mid-rise apartment buildings like you see in downtown Milwaukee or in other suburbs and, also scattered throughout Portland or other cities throughout the country. And then it's everything that's kind of smaller than that, but larger than a detached single house. And that's what really a lot of land is consumed by, and in some cities up to 80% of the land area is consumed by or is zoned for only detached single homes. And so that's why this has been kind of a widespread focal point for jurisdictions over the past decade or more, is to really look at how we can provide some of the housing styles that were commonly provided historically, but have been regulated out of existence. So again, since about the middle of the 20th century. And so just to reiterate, it's here as the bottom is some examples of what we're talking about is duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. So buildings that have 2, 3, or 4 dwellings in one building or on one lot. And then townhomes, which are attached housing, and then cottage clusters, which are detached housing, small detached houses on, surrounding kind of a common green, area on a smaller, typically a smaller lot. So here's the area where the county is responsible for zoning, that is within the urban growth boundary. And this is where these regulations apply. And so it's the zoning districts that you see listed here. It's anywhere in the urban area that allows single detached homes, also has to allow these additional housing types. And so the county has a whole collection of zoning districts that all really relate to the average minimum lot size that's allowed when you do a subdivision. And so, we'll kind of look at these a little bit more in more detail. But as you can see, there's the yellow on this map. All of the dark gray are the actual cities The yellow is what the county is responsible for zoning, which is low density residential. And then the white that's within the white patches and everything within that is areas that are zoned by the county, but not low density residential zones. So commercial zones, industrial, medium density, other zones that are not just for historically for single detached housing. Here's more closely our area. So you can see that, this is all of these neighborhoods everywhere except the McLaughlin corridor and, obviously Rose Villa and Willamette View Manor. There's a medium density area around the downtown Oak Grove. Not sure if I can zoom in on this. Around downtown Oak Grove. And then also there's some medium density residential along Courtney, around McLaughlin. And then obviously the McLaughlin corridor itself, which includes some commercial, industrial, high density residential, and medium density residential. And none of those areas in white are impacted by this. We're really only focused on the low density residential. So when you look at this, it kind of, this is what's called a plan detail, when you're talking about zoning. And so you can see the commercial strip along McLaughlin, kind of the orangish brown color along either side of it is the medium density or higher density residential. Little patch of industrial down there, but then most of the yellow it's all urban low density residential. And so that's the plan designation. It's not as granular, it's not as specific as the or individual zone. And so this is the area this is the area that's impacted. It's not really concerned about what the zoning is. It's more concerned about what the kind of what the plan designation is. It's the urban low density residential area. And so when you cancel that out and cancel out the this is the whole area that's impacted. But here's what it looks like when you actually look at the individual zoning districts that the county has. So all of the red is what's called R10, and that's what we've commonly thought of as what the zoning is for the area. But the green is R7, and there's a lot of R7 around Park Avenue and around the downtown Oak Grove, historic downtown Oak Grove. And then there's smatterings of R8.5. And a little bit, there's an R20 on Woodland Way, south of Oak Grove Boulevard. And so there's these different zoning districts, and really all of these zoning districts really mean is when you do a subdivision, how big is the average lot size that you're allowed to create, or how small is the average lot size that you're allowed to create. And so really what happens when we have to adopt, according to the state legislation, when we have to adopt these regulations, again, it doesn't care about the specific zoning, whether it's R7 or R10 or whatever. It really just looks at, is it a residential zoning district that allows single family, detached housing? And then is the lot size large enough for the proposed use? And so, it's all becoming pretty fuzzy in terms of what the individual zones actually mean, because a lot of cases our zones, there's a lot of the area that was built up before 1960 when the zoning code was adopted. And so a lot of lot sizes for existing homes don't comply with the zoning minimum lot size required for zoning that's applied to it. And that's how arbitrary the zoning actually is that was adopted. And so it's just kind of important to keep in mind that a lot of what you see on the ground today is not legal to build today. And so just because something is zoned R10 does not mean that it is a perpetuation of what you see on the ground today. A lot of what you see on the ground today is not legal to build. And that's exactly what happened in the mid-20th century with these kinds of traditional housing styles that have, often been, produced in, urban areas including Oak Grove. There's lots of, plexes and garden apartments and, other kinds of attached housing, and small lot housing. That's all around the community that's been there since before the zoning code was first adopted in 1960. And none of those would be allowed to be built today. And so that's what this code or that's what this legislation is seeking to do, is to require jurisdictions to allow these traditional housing types like they did before they adopted their zoning codes in the mid-20th century. So in order for the county, what the county had to do, and this slide is really just pointing out that, there's parts of the code that the county really doesn't have any flexibility with. They need to allow, these housing types in the zoning districts that allow, single family detached housing. The review process, again, it's a building permit, and we'll talk about what that is rather than a land use review. And obviously or maybe not obvious, I say obviously because, obviously I'm into this all the time, but, the county can't regulate housing in, with respect to, with the zoning code. So what did the county have control over? They had a little bit of flexibility over how large a site must be in order for different types of middle housing to be developed. And we'll show what that ended up being. They were allowed to restrict, certain kinds of, development, middle housing development in floodplains and other natural hazard or resource areas. There's no control over, they did have some control over parking, and, that's a completely different discussion. But ultimately while they could have more flexibility for middle housing, it couldn't be any more restrictive than what is required for a single detached home. So that was the whole idea, is to kind of move towards more what's called a form-based code, where you're regulating what a building looks like and, kind of the size of the building, the location on the site, kind of the design features of it. But whether it has one dwelling or two or three or four is not really as relevant as just, does the building kind of fit in with the, the building envelope for the site. So that's ultimately what was, they were seeking to accomplish here. So what did they actually do? They had to add all the middle housing types as allowed uses in the low density residential zones. They had to clarify, the standards that do apply to middle housing, because taking a step back, I say that these were regulated out of existence, or that they were basically, not allowed. Well, that's not entirely true. The zoning code is, in the low density residential, is always allowed for different kinds of attached housing, but there's different loopholes that you had to jump through in order to be able to build those housing types. And so now what they had to do is to clarify, when the difference, which standards actually apply to middle housing, and they can't be any more restrictive than, single detached. So there was a lot of work that they had to do there, just cleaning up the code. And we're not going to cover all of that stuff, but that was really a lot of the work that they had to do, because again, they've allowed these to be built. They just made it really hard. There is a new section, of the code that applies to the plexes and cottage clusters, which again, we're not going to get into. It's too, it's really kind of abstract, but I'm happy to answer questions about this if anyone does have any, either during the meeting or afterwards. In an example of how arbitrary the zoning code actually is, the county did have a 3,000 square foot minimum lot size for any residential development, other than, townhomes in specific zones for them. But ultimately, there are lots that were created that are 2,500 square feet, or other lots that are smaller than 3,000 square feet that were unbuildable unless you also were able to buy the lot next to it, and then you could put up a house on it. And so ultimately, to comply with state law, again, where you have to allow any historically created lot that is zoned for a residential use to be developed with, with a residential use. The county did remove this particular provision, which they noted, I shouldn't say again, which the county planners noted that they never found a reason why this provision existed. It's just a way, ultimately, it's just a way of a mechanism that prevents lots that could have been developed with housing from actually being developed with housing. And it just made it difficult to actually for people to, use their property that they may have already purchased. Anyway, that's that kind of arbitrary provision that has no backstory behind it. It just exists, is really an example of, again, how arbitrary a lot of zoning provisions are from the mid 20th century. And so that's why this zoning reform, was, kind of heavy-handed forced by the state, is because, our housing affordability is out of control, and there's a lot of these arbitrary, regulations in the municipal codes all across the state, all across the country, that have these kinds of restrictions on them. So anyway, we're going to jump in and say, when they say add all middle housing types as allowed uses, what does that actually mean? This is really the only one of these I'm going to dig into. So when you're looking at the code, there's a big part of the what it means to be in one of the R zones, one of the urban, low density residential zones, is what can actually be built there, what you can actually do with the land. It's, what's, even less important than lot sizes is what can you actually do, and a lot of people might think, oh, well, you can build a house. Well, you can have a bed and breakfast, an inn or a residence. But as you see here, there's a, when you look at the code, the column for our R zones, which includes R10, R7, all of the residential zones that are in Oak Grove, you can see that bed and breakfast inns are a C, which is a conditional use. So you can't do it outright. You have to go through a review process, but in the residential zones, you can have a bed and breakfast, including a quite sizable one. You can see that bus shelters are allowed as an accessory use. So you can't have an empty lot with a bus shelter, but you can put a bus shelter on a lot that's already developed with, some other use like a house. That's allowed. And since it's an accessory use, you don't even need a review. That can just be a simple, building permit. You can see that cemeteries are allowed in the residential zones. Childcare facilities are allowed. Both of those are conditional uses. But art galleries, museums, and visitor centers, not allowed. Community halls would be allowed in a PUD. Composting facilities, not at all. You see what I mean? So it's like there's all these different things that are already allowed in the residential zones with different kinds of reviews. And so it's really a misnomer to say that this is exclusive or that this is exclusive single family zoning. It never was. It wasn't built that way, and technically it's not even zoned that way today. But there are a lot of hoops to jump through, or there were a lot of hoops to jump through if you wanted to do anything other than a detached home. So when you scroll down to the list to include it for dwellings, then these are the dwellings. These are the types of dwellings that the county, regulates and allows in these different zones. We're still focused on our, R5 to R30 column, which is, includes our zones in Oak Grove. And so you can see that there's lots of different housing types that are allowed. The only ones that are not allowed are congregate housing facilities and multifamily dwellings. But interestingly, there are multifamily dwellings in these zones because they were there before 1960. So, just again, even when it says you can't do something, it might already exist and have been there for a long time. And it's just part of the fabric of the community that we don't even pay any attention to. So just, kind of keep that in mind. But everywhere you see a P, that means it's a primary permitted use. That means all you need to do is get a building permit. So when we scroll, or when we look more closely, I should say, I'm the one that's scrolling here. So when you look at the middle housing types, then what they did is they added these rows. That's what they mean by, allowing these middle housing types in these zones. What they did is they added these rows for cottage clusters, duplexes, quadplexes, townhouses, and triplexes. And then they just specified that they're a primary permitted use in the R5 through R30 zones. So that's basically it in a nutshell, is that if you have a lot in one of these zones, you can put a duplex on it, or you can put a quadplex on it, or you can put some townhomes on it. And that's, the density is irrelevant. The lot size per dwelling, irrelevant. What matters is that you have a lot in one of these zones, and these are allowed uses with simply a building permit. Now there are some footnotes. So anyway, there's footnotes, but it's ultimately these things are allowed. There are some standards, but they're allowed as primary permitted uses with very straightforward reviews and clear and objective approval criteria. So what that means when you have clear and objective approval criteria is that all you have to do is make sure that you're checking each box on the application, and then you know that you're going to get approved. So there's not a review that can be impacted by public comment, for instance. If something is measurable and clearly in the plan, then and meets the standard that's defined for it, it's a big enough lot, it's this, it's that, then what is there to review or comment on? It clearly meets the criteria, it gets stamped with approval, you get your permit. And so that was really the kind of the big change, was that you're just a simple building permit now. And so, but there's a lot of, comprehensive plan amendments, a lot of zoning code ordinance stuff to change. So anyway, that's, again, we're not going to go through all of that. They did a lot of feedback on this. I'm not going to go through all of theirs, or I'm going to scroll past all of their slides because they're in here. But, ultimately, this was something where there was community support and community disapproval kind of in balance when this was happening. And so it's depending on who you are, and kind of what your opinions are, you might think oh well, everybody was really against this, or everybody was really for this, but it was really a mixed bag. It was about half and half. So a little more detail on cottage clusters, because this is kind of a new type housing typology that is, there's not a lot of this yet, but this is one thing that is being explored by a lot of builders, is that you have a common area, a yard, if you will, kind of in the middle with a little path, to all of the entryways on, the dwellings. But the idea is that these are smaller dwellings. And the idea of having a smaller dwelling is that it tends to be more affordable. And also, sharing a single, lot that might have been developed with a single residence that's sold very expensively, you could have a collection of dwellings that could all be sold for much more modest prices and still yield, an investment return for the builder or the property owner. And so, there's obviously some standards that are, very specific, or unique to this building typology that don't apply to a single building. And so that's the kind of stuff that you're going to see, in that special section for these kinds of housing types, is just, the kinds of things that they might need to regulate, because they are a little distinct from a single detached home, but the code itself just can't be more onerous than for a single detached home. And so that's really the point of the legislation, is to put these kinds of developments on par with building a single home that you would have to sell for a lot of money, you know, kind of at the higher end of the price range in order to, you know, make a profit on it as an investor. So anyway, I'm happy to take questions on cottage clusters, you know, again, if anyone has any, and we can always come back to this slide if necessary. So there are no upcoming events. All of this is 3 years past. This is one example of a middle housing development that has occurred. So here's Courtney, and here at the trolley trail, what you're seeing, that kind of green space at the center of at the top is the field for Oak Grove Elementary School. And on the left is from 2022. And this is a picture showing that they're on Southeast Courtney Lane, that there's I think it's actually a duplex that's right there at the street. But anyway, there's a building right there at the corner of Courtney Lane and Courtney Ave. And then there's another house, you know, that's just to the north. And then you see those kind of 4 skinny lines. That used to be one lot. And that was one empty, undeveloped lot that had been sitting there for a while with, you know, nothing had happened. And then, as you can see on the right, now there's a building there. And so what this is it's technically a quadplex. I think technically it might be townhomes, but it was it's a quadplex that it's 4 attached side-by-side dwellings, and it looks like one structure. And it's, you know, on what happened was, and why you have the kind of the 4 slices on the left is what's called a middle housing land division. And this was part of the complementary legislation that is intended to encourage ownership of these middle housing units, so that they're not just all owned by a landlord and rented out, but that you know, you'll be allowed to divide these and sell them as individual dwellings to owners who will own them, and you know, and be able to accrue you know, capital or you know, equity in their home. And anyway, the middle housing land division is allowed to be applied to any middle housing that you already have an approved building permit for. And what it does is it just allows you to draw some lines to put each dwelling on its own fee simple lot that can be sold. And so that's what you're seeing here, you know, in this particular case. But this is a lot of what we would probably see middle housing wise, is, you know, not a tear down of a house and having it replaced with middle housing, but having an empty lot, a lot that's been sitting empty for a while, that ends up getting built, you know, with a, you know, with a, instead of one new dwelling, you know, up to 4, or if in the case of a cottage cluster, 5 or more. So, you know, this is probably our best example, because it was one of the earliest ones that was permitted, and so you can actually see it, you know, on the ground. And so one of the questions we've had is, you know, is this appropriate? You know, is this the kind of thing that, you know, is this something crazy that Oregon's requiring that, you know, is out of sorts with, you know, zoning practice? No, this is right in line. This is exactly, this is how many, you know, this is a map showing, you know, green dots for approved zoning reforms, and, you know, the yellow and orange dots are for ongoing, you know, reforms that are underway. And so this is really a widespread practice, is looking at zoning codes and trying to figure out how they're preventing housing from being built that historically would have been built in these kinds of neighborhoods. And it really started, you know, back in 1998 with Houston, Texas, doing a minimum lot size reform and kind of their central urban loop, which is kind of a big area because it's Houston. But nonetheless, they were so successful at producing infill housing that remained affordable to middle-class home buyers even during a period of sustained economic growth, that they expanded it in 2013 to include the rest of the city. And so, this has been a way that Houston has been able to add tens upon tens of thousands of new homes during a period of economic growth that are infill housing, again, not tear downs, not clearing neighborhoods and rebuilding them with, smaller lots or whatever, but infill housing, and being able to do so and, kind of keep pace with the growth demand. And you can still buy brand new townhomes in Houston, even detached homes, for right around $300,000, which is quite amazing for an area that's seeing such strong economic growth. It's certainly an outlier among major cities, it feels like, in America. But there's a list kind of here in the background that shows, a lot of the more recent attempts at, or more recent successes at zoning reform. And they're a very diverse collection of cities, and it really has been picking up the pace, particularly during the pandemic, as the housing affordability crisis really expanded nationwide and came to a flashpoint. You've been seeing a lot more activity in this space. So if this is something that's interesting to you, the website is down here in the bottom right corner, and you can kind of check into this and see, what's actually being done. Yeah, it's also something I'm happy to take questions on now or later. Yeah, so there are some extra slides. Not really going to go through everything, but I thought I might have had something else. Nope, I'm going to call that good. I'm happy to, again, show a slide again, oh, this is the one that I wanted to talk about, actually. The last one I'm going to talk about is the minimum lot sizes for the different kinds of middle housing. And so for the triplexes or quadplexes or cottage clusters, you do need to have a minimum lot, a lot that is a certain size, but it doesn't matter which zone it's in. And so again, like I said, a lot of times we have zones where there are lots that are smaller than the zoning designation, or even smaller than their next door neighbor, but in the same zone. And, and you may not be able to do the same thing with your property that your neighbor can if you're on a smaller lot than your neighbor, even if you're in the same zone. So again, this is just another example of, where they're regulating things based on, site conditions rather than the zone that you're in. And so again, just kind of thinking about those zones, it's really good to really think about, whether it's R10 or R7 or R5 or whatever, that really relates to the average minimum lot size that's allowed when you subdivide a property. And so far, nothing that we've talked about tonight is a subdivision. And so, just kind of keep that in mind, that, there's no density math here to do. This is really just about what you can do with a lot of a particular size in any of these residential zones. So I'll stop there. I'll take any questions, and I'm happy to show, to scroll back to any slides that might be relevant.
Jane had a question, and then Joyce.
Can you hear me, Joseph?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question regarding the cottage clusters. If I were to buy a unit, one of the small houses in a cottage cluster, how does the county tax my property as far as the footprint, or how do they decide? Is it like that section that you showed on Courtney Boulevard, that they arbitrarily just assume this is your chunk of land? How does that work for taxing purposes?
Yeah, so if this were developed as a cottage cluster instead of a side-by-side fourplex, then the lot lines that you see drawn on the left would be different. It would be little squares, or little, you know what I mean? It would just, I wish I had an example, but the best examples are from, at this point, are still from Portland. But you'll basically see the lines would be carved up in some way, to put each dwelling on its own lot, that would then be what you're taxed on.
So that the buyer would understand that you're buying this little piece of pie
Correct.
as well as the structure. Okay, interesting. Joyce?
Well, just to spin off of that, then is the common area jointly owned, or how does that work?
Yes. Yeah, that is something that is a factor to consider, is that I don't know, a lot of times it ends up being under an HOA, but I don't know if, it would kind of have to be, something along those lines to allow, the common area to be, maintained, as a group, or, as a joint effort or whatever. So, I haven't seen the permits of any cottage clusters yet to see how they've addressed that. But typically what I have seen in county code is that they don't prescribe the solution. They just say, here are some different options for shared ownership models that, and something needs to be selected, in order for, this permit to be approved. But they don't really care what you choose to do. And so it could look a variety of different ways, but commonly you would see this under an HOA.
You studied pocket neighborhoods. There was an architect that came.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Well, pocket neighborhoods have the shared community, sometimes a building, storage place, and it all faces inward like you're showing on this slide. I just was wondering if you knew about pocket neighborhoods.
Pocket neighborhoods.
Yeah.
I think that's another term for cottage cluster.
Okay. So I have two questions. What, first of all, did I hear you say land witch when you were talking about Courtney, or was that my imagination? Did you hear that question?
Hear about land? No, I didn't understand the question.
Did you say land witch when you were talking about that fourplex that had the slices in a pile on Courtney that you showed us? No. Okay.
No, it's a middle housing land division.
Okay, I thought I heard the word land witch.
That's
Okay,
not work.
my other question is, I like it. Yeah, my other question is, can I research, for example, someone in my neighborhood that may have a conditional use permit or not? If I'm curious whether the daycare or the daycare facility for elders or handicapped people actually has a conditional use permit, can I look that up?
Yeah, in some cases, where conditional use permits are required, yes, you can look those up on, the county has a website called Excella, and we can share that out. The link has changed recently. I always just go look for Clackamas County Excella, which is spelled AACCELA. And you can search for all kinds of permits. It's the county's online permitting system. And so you can search for conditional use permits under the planning section, or you can search for building permits. And so if anyone does, puts in a new sink, and has to install some plumbing, there's a permit that they need that you can go search for that and see. You can also search for historic building permits and, find the building plans for your house that had to be submitted and approved, back whenever it was built. So the Clackamas County Excella website is, you can get to all of that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
So Joseph, I can't see anybody on screen right now that is online if they might have a question. So I'm not quite sure how to handle that, as long as you're sharing your screen.
You can unspotlight them.
How do we, there they are. Okay. Thank you. Were there any, Linda Seals has a question.
Yes, with all the talk about the actual land and the use of the land, there are certain, like my street, Woodland Way, it can't handle heavy traffic. It's not a regular street. There's no curbs. You can barely get by the potholes. If somebody built on, say, an acre of land, multiple housing, do they then have to do something to the street?
It would depend. There's different requirements that still apply. And, you know, one of those is that if you're going to create a certain traffic impact, then you need to do a traffic impact analysis, and you may be required to improve, you know, public facilities in order to be allowed, you know, get your permits. So, you know, you might have to upgrade the street with curbs and sidewalks, and or maybe a sidewalk on one side, or, you know, some other kind of modern improvements. But they can only require that a certain amount. So it's this kind of trade-off that the engineers have to analyze and figure out what they can legally require you to do versus, you know, what impact you're creating on the community. So that is something that's factored in. Just because it's only a building permit doesn't mean that you don't also have, you know, some of these other hoops to jump through. But it's not a land use review.
Okay, so I want to remind us about what time we're at. At the same time, I saw a question from Wayne and then also from Ben.
Maybe it's too early to know this, but it would seem to me that with this additional housing opportunities, that the land values will begin to increase because they can see the extent of the total improvements, and the cost of that will be much more than putting a single house on a lot. I don't know if anybody even knows if that's going to, I mean, I'm assuming the real estate people would love this because they'd love to see the property values increase.
Yeah, when you, it's kind of a misnomer to call this an upzoning, but this is often referred to, this kind of thing has been referred to as an upzoning. It's really a reform, but, you know, when you do something like this so broadly, you know, you're not targeting a specific small area like right around the light rail station, but you're doing it across a vast area, then it has a dampening effect on, you know, that kind of, you know, price increase and speculation. And so because these kinds of reforms are having to be adopted by not just the county across the entire area, but all of the cities in the metro area, then you have this really, really widespread impact that, you know, with the really small market absorption rate that was predicted, is really going to have minimal impacts on that kind of price increase that you would normally see when you upzone a very small area.
Yeah.
I'll make it brief, because you already mentioned that you haven't seen any cottage clusters come through yet, but I seem to recall that the property on Oakfield that was the flower shop was considered cottage clusters. Do you know if they decided to go that way, or if they sort of intentionally made another choice? Yeah.
I don't know for sure. I did see that they were exploring it, but like you said, I haven't noticed anything. I know they demoed the building that was there, and so you kind of anticipate that they're going to do something more than nothing. But yeah, I don't have anything more than kind of what you shared.
Good. Stay tuned, friends.
Joseph, I had one other question that someone had given to me before the meeting, that they wanted to know if there was multiple kind of housing or whatever that was going. There's a lot where a house has been taken down on Sunset Court and Oakfield.
Sunset
So
Court.
Yeah, it's just that's north of Concord, in between Risley and Concord.
Yeah, I see it.
Just a couple of blocks from Fred Meyer's.
Yeah.
Just as you kind of come up the hill there.
I don't have any recollection of seeing anything from Sunset Court. Let me see.
Well, if you don't have anything now, I can send that question
No.
to you. Maybe we can track it down for people, because I did drive by there and it is, the house is gone and there's, so it looks like they're getting ready to do something, so. There was.
Fascinating. Yeah, there's nothing, nothing in the land use review database. So. But yeah, that's all I have, unless there's any other final questions. And again, you can always email us with questions, and I'm happy to respond to those either by email or at the next meeting.
Got a couple of quick questions, Joseph. First, I think when it's a permitted use, that means we as a council don't see that development before it goes to the building department for permitting. Unlike some other properties where we would see a conditional use permit process would include our input, right?
Correct.
So, yeah, so a question I had was, even with these duplex middle housing allowances, there still is certain planning requirements and building requirements that have to be met. You can't just put a house right up to the property line on each side or to the back or to the front. Those things still apply to some degree unless they've been specifically altered by this new ordinance, right?
Which they have not, and that's correct.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, thanks. That's it.
Thanks, Joseph. So, I appreciate your time. I know we all appreciate your time, the amount of information that you gave us. And just a reminder to everybody, if there was something that went by too fast, we record our meetings and they're all online. And you can go there and you just zoom it right up to the part you want to listen to. So it's all recorded for us. So thank you for taking the time. So you're on the agenda again. Do you have a Duarte, or shall we just pass and put the next thing tonight?
The only thing that's come through is that there was an approval for a 20-bed memory care facility on Linden Lane, where I think like 6 months ago or less, they had received approval for a triplex. And so anyway, it's in the medium density residential zone. So the triplex had to go through a review instead of just a building permit. It's all very upside down right now. And we'll talk about this more in coming months, because the county has another project underway that could be kind of interesting. But anyway, for some reason they had a triplex permit, they got it approved, and then they came back and did a memory care facility permit and got that approved. And that's on Linden Lane, just south of Courtney, on the east side of the street. It's about a 1 acre lot, so it could house a pretty big structure, for a memory care facility. So anyway, that's all that's come through. It's been pretty quiet.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again. So Jane, we're at our agenda. We want to talk about board nominations.
Yes, I would like.
And I'm going to invite you to stand so that I'm sure that everybody really hears.
Okay, I will follow it. I would just like to let everyone know that as per our bylaws, each February of odd number of years, we will hold an election for board members. And according to bylaws also, one must be a voting member to take position as a board member. Inquiries and requests were made to all of our voting members, and we do have 3 people who have considered throwing their name into the hat. So next month we will have elections for an open position of member at large, and also my position as treasurer, and a open position that we've had for secretary. And 3 of those people are here in the room today. They're Joyce and Ben and Daniel. And we will hold elections next month. Must be a board member a voting member to vote. And we have to have at least 10 voting members. So please do come to the meeting next month, because we will need to have at least a quorum to vote new officers. That will be next month in February the 20th.
26th.
26th. Thank you.
So did we want people to stand and introduce themselves?
They'd like to, they'll have to do it again next month.
Well, you
And
know,
also, there can be other nominations made from the floor, either tonight or at the next meeting, so bear that in mind. If you'd like to nominate yourselves, that's possible.
so I'd just like people to say who they are and give us a, like, 30-second. Who are you anyway? How about that?
Sure, I'll stand. Everyone, Daniel, Larry Roots, and, what Alex said, there's some need for help on the board, and, figured, you know, I always come to these meetings and, enjoy kind of hearing about what's going on, and, that being a small part of everything that we're looking at here, so figured I'd, throw my hat in. So, if you feel so inclined, you're a voting member, you can vote for me.
Hi everyone, my name is Ben Cheney, like I said, I'm up on, Briggs. We've been in the community for about 2 years now, got that place there, been in Oregon for about a decade and a half, my wife and I. I'm a civil engineer by training, and, just kind of, you know, interested in the local community and wanted to try to, you know, give a hand, as it were. I am also, on a board of a nonprofit, called Umbrella. It's a fiscal sponsorship agency, so a kind of different type of structure, but that's the kind of my relevant experience there, so would appreciate any votes if you have them.
Okay, good.
I'm Joyce Johnson, and I've kind of been involved with the Oak Grove Community Council sometime in 2020. Because there was a development that is in process now on my street, 12 houses, and was worried about traffic impact, and Rothy Road is a kind of a mess with no school zone, and Jim Bong and I have been involved in getting the speed lowered and signs that are appropriate, and working with Safe Routes to Schools and the county. That was separate from this development interest that I had, and just Joseph got me involved with you all to hear information. And now that we find out that I really am in Oak Grove, I will, you know, run for secretary.
I just want to say too, that, and, you know, in the last 5.5 years, we have not had a full board. So, it's pretty exciting to have 3 people coming on, and so Joseph and Wayne, and then Ben comes on as our at-large members, and Dan said he would come on as the treasurer, and Joyce is the secretary, and Mark is the vice chair, and I'm going to remain as the chair. I'll give it another, you know, if I start deciding I'm too old to do anything else, well, then I'll bail out. Anyway, so that will be a full board. So it's exciting to us that we'll have that opportunity, and we're hoping to do a little more organizing and get more people involved in our community. So, with that, so next month, then people, if they want to nominate somebody else, or you want to run against us, I mean, you know, this is a community, so.
Yeah.
It's all good, it's all good. All right. Mark, you have something with, okay, I'm supposed to be able to figure out how to do this, right? First, I'm gonna go to share, right?
Yes.
And now where is it? Just to your screen. I have to go to this. Yes. Want to share. And then I want to share.
So while you're doing that, so I have 2 announcements. First one is that many of you probably have heard of or been to the Oak Grove Festival that is taking place this year on Saturday, June 28th from 11 to 4. You'll hear a lot more about that as we go through the year. Starting in February, we'll be taking vendor applications. We should have at least 100, if not 100 more applications this year. And every year we try to improve things a little bit better than the year before. So I won't tell you anything about that until later. So you have to come back. So just put that on your calendar. That'll a lot more about that in the future. The second one is that I'm the vice chair of the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District, which is our local parks department. And there is an opportunity for all of us to be involved in some decision-making around our parks. And that's coming up, if you can see on the screen there, that's coming up on Saturday, February 8th. And this is going to be held at the Milwaukee Community Center between 3:30 and 6:30 p.m. And we're going to feed you. You're going to get fed. So there's going to be several different things going on during that period. And so this is really your opportunity to find out some things about what's happening at the property at Concord, the park that's being built there and the library, and the new community center that's going there. There's also a new project, new park going that's being developed in Jennings Lodge at the Jennings Lodge Elementary School. You'll be able to see plans about how that's developing. The other thing is that the district is going through what's called master plan or systems plan. And we want some feedback from you about what kind of things that you would like to see happen in future parks. If you would like to see a swimming pool or a basketball court or pickleball court, those things help us to plug that into that system plan as we decide how we're going to develop the parks we have and how we would design parks that are new coming up. We have several different properties that the district owns that over time will be developed into a park as we get money for it. So all of this is really helpful as we set this master plan into place that's still being developed that will take us through the next 10 years. So come on February 8th, I'm sure would love to see some of you there. And it's good Mexican food we're serving, so come for that at least. All right, thank you.
All right. One other announcement I want to make is that there is an opening on the committee for community involvement with the county. If you go on the Clackamas County website, you're interested in some of their boards and committees, that there is an opening, but you can only, the application process is only open until January 31st. If someone is interested in being part of the CCI, the Committee for Community Involvement, you can go on the site or get in touch with us, and we can help walk you through that. It would be really nice if we had somebody from our urban area on that committee. So that's my plug for it. Are there any other announcements that need to be made? Anybody in the online community that has an announcement? Greg.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Oak Lodge CERT is going to do another public CPR, AED, and first aid certification training. And that's at no cost. The certificates, if you do want the certification, are going to be like $8 or $14 or something like that. But the training is no cost, and it's a full certification training. So check out events at on the Facebook at Oak Lodge CERT, and that's March 15th or 22nd. I've got to firm up the venue for it, but probably Rose Villa or possibly Willamette View.
Thank you. Any public comment? Anything else for the good of the order? If not, we declare this meeting to be adjourned as soon as I get the